Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise to speak about the Disability Parking Scheme permit in Queensland and the fact that visually impaired people are currently unable to obtain disability parking permits. Mr Deputy Speaker, Mrs Cheryl Callaghan and her husband and carer, Mr Kevin Callaghan, recently visited me to discuss their concerns with this Australian Disability Parking Scheme. Mrs Callaghan is legally blind, which is a permanent and incurable impairment. As such, Mrs Callaghan has been unable to drive for a number of years, relying on her husband to drive her wherever she needs to or would like to go. Mr and Mrs Callaghan recently went to their GP to have an application form signed for the ADPS permit, and they were shocked and confused when the doctor wouldn't sign it, as Mrs Callaghan did not meet the criteria. And Mr Deputy Speaker, I was shocked and confused myself when they came and saw me, because I assumed that someone was blind would be able to get a disability permit myself. And since speaking to many people in the community, they're all of that same opinion, that someone that's legally blind would be able to get a disability permit. So I don't know whether everyone in the House was aware of it or not, but I wasn't. So Mrs Callaghan has had a number of accidents, and as a result of her blindness, falling over objects such as uneven ground, the car park wheel stops, gutters, stairs, and her blindness stops her from walking without the assistance of a white cane. She says she does not feel safe in a public place without a carer. In 2010, a national review was undertaken, and as a direct result, nationally recognised disability parking permit scheme was introduced with minimum standards. This national eligibility criteria for the permit was implemented, and the eligibility exclusively focuses on the applicant's ability to walk. As such, people with intellectual, psychiatric, cognitive or sensory impairments are not recognised as having a disability. However, under this scheme, states and territories have the flexibility to provide additional concessions to meet the needs of local permit holders. So given this, I wrote to the Transport Minister a few weeks ago to consider changing Queensland's criteria to allow the visually impaired to obtain disability parking permits. This would align Queensland with the Australian Capital Territory and New South Wales, where people who are legally blind are able to apply for and obtain an ADPS permit. Being able to park in wider designated parking spaces with closer proximity to their location would make an element of life so much easier for people like Mr and Mrs Callaghan and those with guide dogs. Mr Deputy Speaker, I received a response from the Minister saying that the eligibility for Queensland scheme remains exclusively on the applicant's ability to walk, and to change the scheme to do so would expand the numbers considerably and may surge public pressure for other impairments as well. Mr Deputy Speaker, I don't think that's good enough for people with any type of disability to say that we can't do this because there's not going to be enough car parks for them. And I'll be continuing to fight to make sure that we can, in Queensland, change this scheme so that people that are blind can access it.
Thank you. Member for Bundaberg. I call the member for Cairns.
Mr Speaker, the 2018 Commonwealth Games broadcasted not just the Gold Coast but Queensland